Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of FFB from the 50. We're going to do something a little bit different today. We're going to actually take a look at how I set my lineup every single week. And here we go. Alright, so first league I'm going to look at is my Dynasty / Keeper League. So on this one my name is Whirling Dervish. It's at the top of the list here. And you'll see this week I'm going against Hurricane Ditka. So let's take a look at my roster. And let's go through, decide who we're going to start, who we're not going to start. All right, so here is my roster as it stands at the moment. Now, keep in mind, this league is a little bit different. I don't make as many moves in this league as I do most of my others. Reason being is I want to make sure that these guys are on my roster at the end of the year. That is the only way that I'll be able to offer them a contract going into next year. If I release these guys and they're not on my final roster, I cannot contract them. So one of the first things I do when I come out here is I look at who I've got on my starting lineup. I look at who they're going against, and then I want to know what their injury status is. So let's take a look up here at Lamar Jackson. So Lamar Jackson at the top, he's got the blue icon with the questionable mark. So let's take a look, see what it says. All right, so last night, NBC Sports Edge came out with a report saying that Lamar Jackson was limited in Wednesday's practice. So I'm just taking a look at this. This is part of the reason that I love Yahoo's fantasy football. I know a lot of the fantasy football sites linked to NBC Sport Edge. I believe it used to be Roto World before they bought it out. I like seeing those reports. I also like seeing these numbers as far as what the performances are like. But the other thing that they do here is they have this really nice indicator here where it says on the right-hand side, Week 13 versus Denver. And it says Denver is going up the second fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks this season. I like to click on that and I like to take a look, see who's done what. All right, so we noticed earlier in the year, Geno Smith had a pretty good game against him at 21.2 points. Davis Mills has not really performed well against anybody. Jimmy Garoppolo did okay. Derek Carr, not so much. Then they had a kind of a rough stretch. But when you look at who they were playing, it's really no surprise. Matty Ice has had his struggles for Indianapolis. Justin Herbert was dealing with his rib injury. Zach Wilson is now benched. It was a really rough week for Trevor Lawrence when he played against him. But then when we take a look after the bye, we take a look at the Bradley Chubb trade, what's happened since then. Ryan Tannehill's put up 23.4 points, Derek Carr 24.28. Even Sam Darnold put up almost 20 points against them. So I'm feeling like that's actually a pretty decent matchup. I feel like that Week 9 bye, after that, we see that they kind of come off the rails a little bit. And you can't say it's because they played better quarterbacks than they were playing earlier in the season. That's just simply not the case. Ryan Tannehill, they played... He's just done okay this year. I wouldn't say he's been fantastic. Derek Carr has already faced him back in Week 4. Sam Darnold is nothing to really get too excited about, so I don't think that's the case. All right, so let's go on back out here to my team, and let's take a look, see what we got. My other option at quarterback is Justin Fields going against Green Bay. Let's take a look at his tag here. So he is still questionable with his shoulder injury. I'm not expecting Justin Fields to play this week. If he does, I will probably still leave him on the bench. Don't forget Darnell Mooney. His season's just ended for the Bears. He's out. They still have Cole Kmet, who came on strongly. Now, Justin Fields' primary points are coming on the ground. I'm not sure if he's not back to 100% health, how much they're going to turn him loose and let him run anyway. The fact that they went out and signed Tim Boyle, tells me that they're not overly optimistic either. So I'm going to leave my quarterback the way that it is. Now, I do have a lot of questions to answer here at wide receiver. This is a league that I've spent the last several years trading for wide receivers, drafting wide receivers, building those wide receivers up. So right now I've got Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams in as my wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. Also on my roster, if you look down on my flex spot, I've got Amon-Ra St. Brown. Directly below him, I've got A.J. Brown. And down in my IR section, I've got Jamar Chase. I've got to take him out here in a little bit. We'll talk about that, what I'm going to plan on doing. I'll just say right now I'm not planning on playing Jamar Chase. This is his first game back. He may be on a pitch count. Love Jamar Chase. Would love to start him, but this is not the week to do so. I know it's going to be a high-scoring game against Kansas City. I'm just worried about his snap share, so not going to go there. So really the question boils down is, do I need to move Amon-Ra St. Brown or A.J. Brown above those other two players? My answer for right now is no. I'm not planning on doing that. Okay, so looking at the running back situation here, I've got Austin Eckler in as my RB1. That's a no-brainer. I do have to look carefully at my RB2. Right now I've got Tony Pollard in there against the Colts. My other options are Ramondre Stevenson, Kareem Hunt, James Conner, and Kyren Williams. So let's analyze here. Should Tony Pollard stay in that RB2 slot, or should I move somebody else up? All right, so let's take a look at here. Let's go out to Tony Pollard. He's going against the Colts that have given up the 13 most fantasy points to running backs this year. And we'll see that it really just has not been all that impressive. Josh Jacobs had a really good game against him. Antonio Gibson did pretty well as a pass-catching back. You start looking at the targets. Those guys were able to catch the ball out of the backfield. Josh Jacobs had 8 targets, 6 receptions. Antonio Gibson, 7 targets, 7 receptions. So when you look at the pure runners, there's not been a whole lot of success against the Colts except for Derrick Henry back in week 4. So that does lend some credence. Maybe I'll keep him in, but let's take a look at my other options. So let's go back out to my team. Let's go back out to my roster here. And I want to look at Ramondre Stevenson. So let's see what's going on with him. Damian Harris has been ruled out for this game, so we should see a heavy dose of Ramondre. But here's the point. Here's the problem that I have with Ramondre this week. He's going to get a lot of volume. If he's not getting it in the passing game, it's not going to matter because I got a feeling Buffalo is going to go up so fast on the Patriots that it's going to become a pass-heavy second half. Now, Ramondre has been a very good receiver out of the backfield for them. So let's take a look at what the other running backs have done. So start to look at some of these performances. Derrick Henry was held at 8.5 points. That was back in week 2. J.K. Dobbins had a pretty decent week against him at 22.3 points back in week 4. If you notice, a lot of those points came in the passing game. He had 4 catches for 22 yards and a touchdown. So already 12 of those 22 points came as a receiving back. Aaron Jones did okay against him. He actually got 143 yards on the ground. Dalvin Cook went for 119 in week 10. Those are the only 2 running backs that have gone over 100 yards on the ground. So looking at this, what does help Ramondre Stevenson is he is a viable pass catcher out of the backfield that will probably end up coming in pretty important in that second half because, like I said, I just really think that's going to be a high-scoring game. I think Buffalo is still going to be able to put up the points. So Ramondre and Tony Pollard, to me right now, that's about a coin flip. James Conner's on bye, so he's a no-go. Kareem Hunt's going against Houston. To me, that just really strikes me as a Nick Chubb game. That is not a game where Cleveland's going to have to pass a lot. I know they might be tempted to, but with Deshaun Watson returning, they're going to want to protect him, even though he's going against Houston. Nick Chubb is a beast. The only way that I could see Kareem Hunt getting a lot of touches is if they are up so high. If Cleveland is beating Houston so badly that they just go ahead and bench Nick Chubb for the second half. I could see that. Kyren Williams is a no-go. We're going to talk about him in a minute because I'm actually going to release him on this video to move Jamar Chase out of my IR slot. So let's go back up here. So really the question for me is here in this RB2 spot, do I stick with Tony Pollard? Do I go with Ramondre Stevenson? I'm just really not 100% sold on either guy at the moment. So looking at Pollard's stats here, I mean, he's done pretty well when he's given the chance, but those huge scoring outputs that he had, that was when Zeke was out. He's back. I mean, I don't know, man. That's going to be the decision that I'm going to have to make. And it is an important decision because this week I'm going against the team that's in third place in this league, Hurricane Ditka. Hurricane Ditka and I actually met in the championship game last year. So this is one that I really would like to win. I think right now I'm leaning towards Stevenson just because he is that viable pass catcher. I can see the Patriots, Mac Jones doing a lot of quick dump-offs to him in the second half. So let's go ahead and move Ramondre Stevenson into that RB2 slot. For tight end, I got Travis Kelce, and I've got Cole Kmet. That's a no-brainer. Kelsey's staying in there. But now let's look at that flex spot. So right now I've got Amon-Ra St. Brown in there. My other options are now A.J. Brown, Tony Pollard, who I moved out of the RB2 spot, Kareem Hunt. Like I said, James Conner's on bye. We're not going to mess with him. Cole Kmet not going in there over the other options. Kyren Williams I'm going to drop. I'm going to move Jamar Chase out of that IR spot. I've already talked about why I'm not going to play Jamar Chase. So really we're going to narrow that down to 3 players. So do I keep Amon-Ra St. Brown in there? Do I go A.J. Brown? Do I go Tony Pollard? And this is one of those where I'm actually leaning this week towards A.J. Brown. And here's why. Amon-Ra has played really well. You can see his output. Week 10, he had 22.1 points. Week 11, 15. Week 12, 27.9. Absolute beast. Jacksonville, I mean, they're capable of putting up points, but when you look at the matchup here, this does tend to lend credence towards an A.J. Brown game. So on the notes here, Tennessee has given up the second most fantasy points to wide receivers. Let's take a look at this. Let's look at the numbers. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at wide receiver 1. I don't want to know what the wide receiver 2 have done. In this offense, I'm A.J. Brown to me is the number 1. So looking back, week 1, Giants really didn't have a wide receiver 1. Week 2, Stephon Diggs, clear-cut number 1, 44.8 points. Week 3 was interesting, though. Devontae Adams, who is the wide receiver 1 for Vegas, only put up 14 points, where Mac Hollins absolutely went off. Okay, so that's kind of a red flag. Week 4, Indianapolis at that point, once again, really, I would say did not have a true number 1 wide receiver. I believe Michael Pittman was out that week. Going to week 5, Terry McLaurin had 12.6 points. Now, wait a minute. Dimey Brown, who was working as the wide receiver 3 at that time, went off for 24.5. So I am starting to notice a trend here. Let's go to week 7. Michael Pittman, wide receiver 1 for Indy, 9.8. Paris Campbell, 23. So Paris Campbell, wide receiver 2, outscored wide receiver 1. When you go down this list, that tends to be the case. So the only real exceptions to that were maybe T. Higgins in week 12, who was operating as Cincinnati's wide receiver 1, went for 24.4, and Stephon Diggs went for 44.8 back in week 2. Otherwise, it's really been more of an RB2 show. So, I don't know. Now we need to go back and take a look at that again. So let's go back to my team. Now, let's go out. Let's take a look at what Jacksonville has done against those wide receivers. So let's go back to Amon-Ra St. Brown. And let's take a look at Jacksonville here. So this is Jacksonville against the receivers this year. And let's just see Michael Pittman. I mean, obviously that one pops off. He was acting as the wide receiver 1 for Indy in week 6, 26.4. Although, honestly, it looks like both Paris Campbell and Alec Pierce had pretty good games. Devontae Adams, clear-cut wide receiver number 1, down in week 9 for Vegas, went for 36.6. They really haven't performed all that well against any wide receivers. These points are pretty well spread out. So, what kind of game script do you think we're going to be looking at here? Let's get out of this, go back to my team here. So let's talk about this. We all know that Tennessee likes to run the ball, and it's going to be a heavy dose of Derrick Henry. The problem with teams that like to run the ball quite a bit is they slow the clock down. They slow the clock down, they eat up that time of possession. That leaves less time for the wide receivers, the running backs, the quarterbacks, tight ends, any of those skill position players for the opposing team to score a lot of points. You need opportunity. And if one team is eating up the clock, it's taking away that opportunity for the other team. Looking at this, I think I've just convinced myself to keep in Amon-Ra St. Brown over A.J. Brown. I feel like Tennessee has actually been pretty good against the wide receiver 1. They're going to eat up a lot of clock. I'm a little worried about the limited amount of snaps that A.J. Brown may see. We already know that Amon-Ra St. Brown is the focal point of that Detroit offense as far as the passing game goes. I think I'm going to keep him in there. So now the question is Amon-Ra St. Brown or Tony Pollard? And honestly, I'm going to go with Amon-Ra St. Brown. He is the clear-cut wide receiver number 1 for that team. Tony Pollard is in a 1A, 1B situation with Zeke Elliott, so he is going to get my edge. So I'm going to keep my roster as you see it here. The only major change I've made since last week was moving Ramondre Stevenson into that RB2 slot over Tony Pollard. Now, we do need to talk about this Jamar Chase situation. I've got him down there. He is now listed as questionable. He's no longer IR eligible. I can't do anything on my roster with him on there. So, and I want to take a look at other defenses. Let's go ahead and drop Kyren Williams. So I'm going to go out here. I'm going to drop players. I'm going to drop Kyren Williams. He's gone. Now let's move Jamar Chase out of the IR back to the bench. Now, I love what San Francisco has been doing on defense, but this week the matchup is not the best going against the Miami Dolphins. So let's go out there and let's just take a look if there's any other players. This is what I do every single week. Every week matters. I want to make sure I've got the best roster I can that given week. The next week will take care of itself. So here are my other options. Now, Seattle is intriguing because they're going against Rams. The Rams don't have their best quarterback, their best 2 wide receivers. They're banged up. Could be a decent matchup. The only problem is Seattle's not been doing all that well as of late. The other one that intrigues me is Green Bay against Chicago. I mean, I'd really like to see Justin Fields play. I think they're going to hold him out. With that being the case, that's an intriguing matchup. I'm not really feeling the firepower. So I think I'm going to stick with what I've got with San Francisco. All right, so there you have it. That is going to be my roster for Week 13, going against the gentleman that I faced in the championship game last year. This one should be an absolute barn burner. This is a good matchup. So wish me luck. I wish him luck. I hope I win. I just hope it's not because any player gets hurt. I hate winning that way. I really hate losing that way. All right, folks, that's it for this episode. Until next time, see ya.